The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training ground as General Marcus Hayes walked between the rows of new recruits. His polished boots clicked against the concrete with the rhythm of a man who had spent 30 years commanding respect through presence alone. At 52, Hayes carried himself with the rigid posture that came from decades of military discipline, his gray hair perfectly trimmed, his uniform pressed to razor-sharp creases. The recruits stood at attention, their young faces a mixture of nervousness and determination. Hayes had seen thousands like them over the years, eager boys and girls fresh from civilian life, dreaming of glory and honor. Most would wash out within the first 6 months. Those who remained would be molded into something harder, something useful. "Listen carefully," Hayes barked, his voice carrying across the field without effort. "In my army there are no shortcuts. There are no participation trophies. There is only excellence or failure. Those who cannot meet my standards will find themselves back home wondering what went wrong." He paused in front of a particularly young-looking recruit whose hands trembled slightly as he held his rifle. Hayes had noticed the boy struggling during weapons training earlier that week. The kid couldn't hit a target at 50 meters, let alone perform under pressure. "What's your name, soldier?" Hayes demanded. "Private Thompson, sir," the boy squeaked, his voice cracking with nerves. Hayes examined the rifle in Thompson's hands with the practiced eye of someone who had inspected countless weapons over the decades. The safety was engaged properly. The stance was adequate. But there was something in the boy's grip that spoke of uncertainty, of fear. "Tell me, Thompson, what do you think makes a good soldier?" The private swallowed hard. "Following orders, sir, and being brave, sir." A few of the other recruits shifted uncomfortably. Hayes had heard similar answers hundreds of times before. They all thought it was about courage, about charging into battle with guns blazing like in the movies. They didn't understand that real warfare was about precision, discipline, and the cold calculation of survival. "Wrong," Hayes said flatly. "Bravery without skill gets you killed. Following orders without understanding gets your entire unit killed. A good soldier thinks, adapts, and never underestimates the enemy." He continued down the line, stopping occasionally to correct a stance or adjust equipment. The morning inspection was routine, something he had done countless times, but it served an important purpose. It weeded out the weak identified potential leaders and established the hierarchy that would keep these soldiers alive in combat. Near the end of the line, Hayes noticed something unusual. One of the recruits stood with a different quality of attention, not the nervous tension of the others, but a calm alertness that spoke of natural ability. The soldier was smaller than most, with sandy brown hair tucked neatly under the regulation cap, and held the standard issue rifle with the kind of casual competence that usually took months to develop. "Your name?" Hayes asked, stopping directly in front of this recruit. "Private Sarah Chen, sir." The voice was clear, confident without being cocky. Hayes studied Chen more carefully. Something about her reminded him of the best soldiers he had known. Not the loudest or the most aggressive, but the ones who seemed to understand warfare at an instinctive level. Her uniform was perfectly maintained, her posture correct but relaxed, and her eyes held a steady focus that impressed him despite himself. "Where did you learn to handle a weapon, Chen?" "My father taught me, sir. He was a hunter. Started taking me out when I was 8. Hayes nodded approvingly. Soldiers who grew up with firearms often had advantages over city kids who had never held anything more dangerous than a water gun. But there was something else about Chen. Something he couldn't quite identify. "What's your goal here, Private?" Chen hesitated for just a moment, as if considering whether to give the expected answer or something more honest. "To serve my country, sir, and to prove that I belong here." The last part caught Hayes's attention. In his experience, soldiers who felt they had something to prove often pushed themselves harder than those who took their place for granted. But they could also be reckless, taking unnecessary risks to gain recognition. "Prove to whom?" he pressed. "To myself, sir." Hayes studied her face, looking for any sign of doubt or uncertainty. He found none. Whatever drove Chen, it ran deep enough to sustain her through the challenges ahead. He made a mental note to watch her progress more closely. The inspection continued for another hour, with Hayes noting various deficiencies and strengths among the recruits. Some would need extra attention in physical fitness, others required work on their shooting skills, and a few showed promise for leadership roles. But it was Chen who lingered in his thoughts as he returned to his office. Hayes had commanded units in 3 different conflicts, from desert operations to mountain warfare. He had seen courage and cowardice, brilliance and stupidity, success and devastating failure. Through it all, he had developed an instinct for recognizing exceptional soldiers, those rare individuals who possessed not just skill and determination, but the indefinable quality that made them invaluable in combat. As he sat behind his desk reviewing training reports, Hayes couldn't shake the feeling that Chen might be one of those exceptional few. But exceptional in what way, he wondered. Time would tell whether his instincts were correct, or whether she was simply another recruit who would fade into the ranks of ordinary soldiers. The afternoon training exercises would begin soon, and Hayes planned to observe them personally. It was unusual for a general to spend so much time watching basic training, but something told him this particular group of recruits deserved his attention, and Private Chen, in particular, might surprise everyone, including herself, before her training was complete. Outside his window, the recruits were already gathering for the next phase of their instruction, their voices carrying on the warm afternoon air. Hayes finished his paperwork and prepared to rejoin them, unaware that his assessment of Chen was more accurate than he could possibly imagine, and that the quiet recruit with the steady eyes would soon challenge everything he thought he knew about warfare and the soldiers who fought it. 3 weeks into basic training, the differences between recruits had become starkly apparent. Private Thompson had indeed washed out, unable to handle the physical demands and constant pressure. Nearly a quarter of the original group had followed him home, their dreams of military service cut short by the harsh reality of Hayes's standards. Those who remained had been forged into something harder, their soft civilian edges worn away by endless drills, punishing physical training, and the unforgiving scrutiny of their instructors. But it was during weapons training that the most surprising developments occurred. Sergeant Rodriguez, the range instructor, had been teaching marksmanship for 15 years. He could spot natural shooters within minutes of watching them handle a rifle, and he prided himself on developing even mediocre talents into competent marksmen. But Private Chen had him completely baffled. "General Hayes wants to see you," Rodriguez told Chen after the morning shooting session. In his office. Now, Chen secured her weapon and jogged across the compound, her mind racing through possible reasons for the summons. She had been careful to follow every regulation, complete every task to the best of her ability, and avoid drawing unnecessary attention. Yet something had obviously caught the general's notice. Hayes was studying a shooting report when Chen entered his office. Without looking up, he gestured for her to sit in the chair across from his desk. The silence stretched for several uncomfortable minutes before he finally spoke. "Sergeant Rodriguez tells me you've been holding back during marksmanship training." Chen kept her expression neutral, though her heart rate quickened. "I don't understand, sir." Hayes looked up then, his gray eyes sharp and assessing. "Your scores are good, Chen. Better than good. But Rodriguez has been watching you and he says you're deliberately missing shots. Easy shots that should be automatic for someone with your apparent skill level." "I'm doing my best, sir." "No, you're not." Hayes leaned back in his chair. "Rodriguez has trained thousands of shooters. He knows when someone is sandbagging. The question is why." Chen remained silent, her jaw set in a stubborn line that Hayes recognized from his own mirror. She wasn't going to volunteer information, which only made him more curious about what she was hiding. "Let me tell you what I think," Hayes continued. "I think you're better with a rifle than you want anyone to know. I think you're afraid that if you show your real ability, it will change how people see you, how they treat you. Am I wrong?" For the first time since entering his office, Chen's composure wavered slightly. Hayes had hit closer to the truth than she was comfortable with. "Permission to speak freely, sir?" "Granted." Chen took a breath. In my experience, sir, being too good at something can be as much a problem as being too bad at it. People expect more, they watch you differently, they assume things about you that might not be true. Hayes nodded slowly. He had seen similar thinking before, usually from soldiers who had learned to manage expectations as a survival strategy. But this level of calculated restraint in someone so young suggested experiences that went beyond normal recruit concerns. What kind of assumptions are you worried about, Chen? That I'm showing off, sir. That I think I'm better than everyone else. That I can't be trusted to follow orders because I might think I know better. She paused, then added quietly, that I'm not really part of the team. Hayes studied her carefully. There was pain in those words, the kind that came from actual experience rather than hypothetical fears. Someone, somewhere, had made Chen feel like her abilities were a liability rather than an asset. Show me, he said suddenly. Sir, your real shooting ability. I want to see what you can actually do. Hayes stood up. Right now. 20 minutes later, they stood on a private section of the range that Hayes reserved for advanced training. He had brought his own rifle, a precision instrument far superior to the standard-issue weapons the recruits used. Chen handled it with the reverence of someone who understood exactly what she was holding. There's a target at 400 meters, Hayes said, pointing downrange. Standard bullseye. Take your time. Chen settled into a shooting position with fluid grace, her body automatically finding the optimal stance. She studied the target through the scope, accounting for wind conditions and distance with practiced ease. Then she fired a single shot. The bullet struck dead center. Again, Hayes ordered. Different target, 600 meters. The second shot was equally precise. Then a third at 800 meters, and a fourth at 1,000. Each bullet found its mark with mechanical precision, as if Chen were operating at a level of skill that transcended normal human limitations. Hayes had seen exceptional marksmen before, elite military snipers who could make kills at incredible distances under battlefield conditions. But Chen was operating with the kind of natural ability that couldn't be taught, only refined. She had the eye, the instinct, and the steady nerves that separated true masters from merely competent shooters. Where did you really learn to shoot like that? He asked when she had finished. My father wasn't just a hunter, sir. He was a competitive shooter, national level. He started training me when I was very young, and I found out I had a gift for it. Chen's voice was steady, but Hayes caught the underlying emotion. I won junior competitions for 8 years running, set records that still stand in 3 different states. And then, Chen was quiet for a long moment. And then I learned that being the best at something doesn't always make people happy. That sometimes it's better to be good enough rather than great. That standing out can make you a target in ways that have nothing to do with your actual abilities. Hayes began to understand. Somewhere in Chen's past, her exceptional skills had created problems rather than opportunities. Perhaps jealousy from peers, unrealistic expectations from coaches, or the kind of pressure that could break even the most talented individuals. She had learned to hide her abilities as a form of self-protection. In combat, Chen, hiding your skills can get people killed. Your teammates, your unit, even yourself. A sniper who holds back isn't protecting anyone. They're failing in their duty. I understand that, sir, but we're not in combat. We're in basic training with a bunch of recruits who are just trying to learn the basics. Me showing off doesn't help anyone. Hayes holstered his sidearm and looked at Chen directly. What if I told you that showing your real ability might help me identify others with similar potential? What if your example could inspire some of these recruits to push themselves harder? What if the Army needs to know about soldiers like you so we can use your talents where they'll do the most good? Chen considered this, her analytical mind working through the implications. You're talking about specialized training, sir. Sniper, school. I'm talking about you living up to your potential instead of hiding from it. For the first time since he had met her, Chen smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her serious features. My father always said that a gift unused is worse than no gift at all. Smart man. What would he think of his daughter deliberately missing targets? Chen's smile faded, replaced by something harder and more determined. He'd be disappointed, sir, and he'd be right to be. Hayes nodded, satisfied that he had finally reached the real Sarah Chen, not the careful, restrained recruit who had been hiding her abilities, but the natural-born sniper who could put bullets exactly where she wanted them, at distances that would challenge even experienced professionals. Report to Sergeant Rodriguez tomorrow morning. Tell him I want your real scores from now on. No more sandbagging, no more hiding. Show everyone what you can really do. As Chen left his office, Hayes made another note in her file. This time, it included a recommendation that would change the trajectory of her military career, and eventually lead to a moment that neither of them could yet imagine, when her extraordinary abilities would be put to the ultimate test. 2 years had passed since Chen completed her basic training and earned her place in the Army's elite sniper program. The shy recruit who had once deliberately missed easy shots had been transformed into one of the most lethal marksmen in the entire military. Her official record showed confirmed kills at distances exceeding 2,800 meters, making her one of only a handful of snipers worldwide capable of such precision shooting. The specialized training had been brutal. Months of advanced ballistics study, weather pattern analysis, camouflage techniques, and psychological conditioning designed to create the perfect long-range killer. Chen had excelled at every aspect, her natural abilities refined into something that bordered on supernatural accuracy. But it was her performance in the field that truly set her apart. During her first deployment, Chen had saved an entire platoon, pinned down by enemy fire by eliminating 3 machine gun nests from positions over 2 kilometers away. The shots were made in adverse weather conditions at night, with limited visibility and crosswinds that would have challenged even veteran snipers. Each kill was clean, precise, and devastating to enemy morale. Her second deployment had been even more impressive. Operating alone behind enemy lines for 3 weeks, Chen had eliminated 17 high-value targets, disrupted supply lines, and provided intelligence that led to a major strategic victory. She had become a ghost, striking without warning and vanishing before anyone could locate her position. By her third deployment, Chen had earned the unofficial designation as the military's most effective sniper. Her kill ratio was unprecedented, her ability to operate independently was unmatched, and her tactical intelligence had proven invaluable in multiple operations. She wore no special insignia, carried no unique weapons, and drew no attention to herself. But among those who needed to know, her reputation was legendary. General Hayes, meanwhile, had been promoted and transferred to a forward operating base in a contested region where precision operations were critical to maintaining tactical advantage. He had specifically requested Chen for his command, knowing that her unique abilities could make the difference between success and failure in the complex operations his forces were conducting. When Chen reported to the base, Hayes was struck by how much she had changed. The uncertain recruit had been replaced by a confident professional who moved with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable with their deadly skills. She saluted properly, but there was something in her eyes that hadn't been there before, a hardness that came from taking lives in service of her country. "Welcome to Forward Operating Base Genesis, Sergeant Chen," Hayes said, returning her salute. "I've been following your service record. Impressive doesn't begin to cover it." "Thank you, sir. I'm ready for whatever mission you need me to complete." Hayes nodded, but he noticed something troubling in Chen's manner. The careful restraint was still there, but it had evolved into something different, a kind of professional distance that kept everyone at arm's length. She had become so focused on being the perfect sniper that she seemed to have forgotten how to be anything else. "How are you adjusting to your role, Chen? Any concerns or issues I should know about?" "No, sir. Everything is proceeding according to regulations." It was a perfectly correct answer that told Hayes absolutely nothing about Chen's actual state of mind. He made a mental note to keep a closer eye on her psychological well-being. Elite snipers often struggled with the isolation and psychological burden of their work, and Chen had been operating at an extremely high level for months without any significant downtime. "I have a mission for you," Hayes continued. "Intelligence suggests enemy forces are planning a major offensive in this sector. We need eyes on their forward positions, assessment of their capabilities, And if the opportunity presents itself, elimination of key leadership targets. Chen nodded. Duration and support requirements, sir? Indefinite duration. Solo operation. You'll have radio contact for reporting but no backup. This is deep reconnaissance in hostile territory. For the first time since arriving at the base, Chen showed a flicker of genuine emotion. Not fear, but anticipation. She was most comfortable operating alone, where her skills could be utilized without the complications of working with others who couldn't match her abilities. Understood, sir. When do I deploy? Tomorrow at 0400. But Chen... Hayes paused, studying her face carefully. This isn't just about your shooting skills. I need your tactical assessment of enemy capabilities. Don't get so focused on potential targets that you miss the bigger picture. Of course, sir. As Chen left his office to prepare for the mission, Hayes felt a nagging concern that he couldn't quite identify. Something about her demeanor suggested a soldier who had become too comfortable with killing, too isolated from the human connections that kept warriors grounded. He had seen it before. Elite operators who became so specialized that they lost touch with the broader purpose of their service. But Hayes also knew that Chen's mission was critical. Enemy forces were massing for what intelligence suggested could be a decisive offensive. Traditional reconnaissance methods had failed to penetrate their security, and satellite imagery couldn't provide the detailed human intelligence needed for effective countermeasures. Chen's unique combination of stealth, precision, and tactical intelligence made her the only viable option for gathering the information they needed. The next morning, Hayes watched from the command post as Chen disappeared into the pre-dawn darkness. Carrying her precision rifle and minimal equipment, she moved like smoke, there one moment and gone the next, leaving no trace of her passage. Within hours, she had vanished completely into the contested territory beyond their perimeter. For the next 5 days, Chen's radio reports provided a steady stream of valuable intelligence. Enemy troop movements, equipment assessments, identification of command structures, and detailed tactical analysis that painted a clearer picture of the threat they were facing. Her observations were professional, precise, and invaluable for planning defensive strategies. But on the 6th day, Chen's reports took on a different tone. She had identified several high-value targets, including what appeared to be a senior enemy commander coordinating the planned offensive. Her requests for authorization to engage became more frequent, more urgent. Target of opportunity, Chen reported during her evening check-in. Senior officer, approximately 2,400 meters from my position. Clean shot available. Requesting permission to engage. Hayes studied the tactical situation on his maps. Eliminating the commander would certainly disrupt enemy plans, but it would also reveal Chen's position and likely compromise her ability to continue gathering intelligence. Negative, Sergeant. Continue observation. Intelligence gathering remains primary objective. There was a long pause before Chen responded. Understood, sir. Continuing mission. But Hayes detected something in her voice that concerned him. Frustration, perhaps even anger at being denied permission to take what she clearly saw as an important target. He made another note in her file, this one expressing concern about her psychological state and recommending evaluation upon mission completion. What Hayes didn't know was that Chen had already made her decision. The commander represented too valuable a target to ignore, and her position allowed for a shot that few snipers in the world could make. In her mind, eliminating this threat was more important than following orders that prevented her from utilizing her unique abilities to their fullest extent. As night fell, Chen settled into her shooting position and began her final preparations. The shot would be one of the longest of her career, requiring perfect calculation of wind, distance, and timing. But she was confident in her abilities, and she believed that results would justify her decision to disobey direct orders. What she couldn't anticipate was how this single shot would set in motion a chain of events that would ultimately bring her face to face with General Hayes under circumstances that neither of them could imagine. Circumstances that would test everything both of them believed about duty, authority, and the true nature of military service. The shot that Chen fired at 2,147 meters would later be recorded as one of the longest confirmed sniper kills in military history. The enemy commander dropped instantly, his death creating immediate chaos among the surrounding troops. But the consequences of that single bullet extended far beyond its intended target. Within minutes of the kill, enemy forces had triangulated Chen's approximate position and began a massive sweep operation. She was forced to abandon her carefully prepared hide site and begin a running battle across hostile territory, using every skill she had learned to stay ahead of the search teams now hunting her. For 3 days, Chen played a deadly game of cat and mouse with enemy patrols. She moved only at night, slept in hidden positions during the day, and used her rifle to eliminate pursuers when stealth failed. Her radio had been damaged during the initial retreat, cutting off communication with base and leaving her completely on her own. Back at Forward Operating Base Genesis, General Hayes was facing a crisis. Chen's last transmission had been the sound of gunfire, followed by silence. Search and rescue operations were impossible in the contested territory where she had been operating, and satellite imagery showed massive enemy activity in the area. As far as Hayes knew, his best sniper was either dead or captured. But Hayes's immediate concerns went beyond Chen's fate. The enemy commander's death had triggered the very offensive they had been trying to prevent, but in a chaotic, uncoordinated fashion that created both opportunities and dangers. Enemy forces were advancing on multiple fronts, but without central coordination, their attacks were poorly synchronized and vulnerable to counteraction. "Sir, we have reports of enemy movement on all sectors," Major Williams reported during the morning briefing. "They're pushing hard, but they seem to be operating without unified command." Hayes studied the tactical displays, his experienced eye reading the patterns of movement and attack. Chen's shot eliminated their command structure, just as they were launching their offensive. "They're committed to the attack, but they've lost strategic coordination. Should we launch a counteroffensive while they're disorganized?" Hayes considered the options. A coordinated response could inflict massive casualties on the advancing enemy forces, but it would also expose his own troops to significant risk. And somewhere out there, Chen might still be alive, trying to make her way back to friendly lines. "Prepare for limited counterattacks on sectors 2 and 5, Hayes ordered. "But keep our main force in defensive positions. If Chen is still out there, I don't want to risk hitting her with our own fire." What Hayes didn't know was that Chen had not only survived, but had been systematically eliminating key enemy personnel as she made her way toward friendly lines. Cut off from orders and operating entirely on her own initiative, she had reverted to her most basic training: survive and inflict maximum damage on the enemy. Her modified mission had become a one-woman war of attrition. Moving through enemy-held territory like a ghost, Chen had eliminated 17 more targets over 4 days, including 3 officers, 2 communication specialists, and multiple infantry soldiers who had gotten too close to her positions. Each kill further disrupted enemy operations and added to the chaos caused by the loss of their commander. But the constant movement and combat were taking their toll. Chen was running low on ammunition, her equipment was damaged, and she hadn't had a proper meal or sleep in days. Worse, she was developing a fever from an infected wound on her arm, making accurate shooting increasingly difficult. On the 7th day after her radio went silent, Chen finally saw friendly positions in the distance. But between her and safety lay an enemy checkpoint that she couldn't bypass or avoid. 4 soldiers were manning a roadblock, and they were alert and well-armed. In her current condition, a direct assault would likely be suicidal. But as Chen studied the situation through her rifle scope, she realized that eliminating this checkpoint would create an opportunity for a major breakthrough. The position controlled a key supply route that enemy forces were using to reinforce their attacks. If she could neutralize the checkpoint and hold the position long enough, friendly forces might be able to exploit the opening. It would mean revealing her position to every enemy unit in the area. It would probably mean her death, but it might also mean the difference between victory and defeat for her entire unit. Chen made her decision with the cold calculation that had been drilled into her during sniper training. Personal survival was less important than mission success, and mission success now meant doing whatever damage she could to enemy capabilities before her luck ran out. The first shot eliminated the checkpoint commander at 400 meters. The second dropped the machine gunner before he could bring his weapon to bear. The third and fourth soldiers died before they fully understood what was happening, victims of shooting so precise and rapid that it seemed impossible from a single marksman. But Chen's position was now compromised and she could hear vehicles approaching from multiple directions. She had perhaps 10 minutes before enemy reinforcements arrived, and her ammunition was down to less than 20 rounds. This would be her final stand. Meanwhile, General Hayes was monitoring radio traffic when reports began flooding in about chaos at the checkpoint. Initial enemy communications suggested they were under attack by a large force, but as more details emerged, the truth became clear. "Sir," Major Williams said, his voice tight with excitement and concern, "we're getting reports that suggest a single sniper has eliminated an entire checkpoint and is now engaged with enemy reinforcements. Based on the location and the described accuracy, it has to be Sergeant Chen." Hayes felt a mixture of relief and dread. Relief that Chen was alive, dread at what her situation must be. "Get me everything we have on that position. Air support, artillery, anything that can help her." "Sir, she's too close to enemy positions. We can't provide support without risking hitting her." Hayes stared at the tactical display, watching the symbols that represented Chen's likely position being surrounded by enemy forces. His best sniper, the soldier he had personally selected and trained, was fighting a hopeless battle alone in enemy territory. But even as enemy forces closed in on Chen's position, her shooting continued with mechanical precision. Each shot eliminated a target, reduced enemy capability, and bought precious seconds for what she now knew would be her final mission. She had become exactly what her training had intended, a weapon of surgical precision operating at the very limits of human capability. What neither Chen nor Hayes could know was that her one-woman war was about to take an unexpected turn. Among the enemy forces responding to the checkpoint attack was a unit that included several American prisoners of war who had been captured during earlier operations. The chaos Chen was creating would soon provide an opportunity for rescue that could change the entire strategic situation. And in that rescue operation, General Hayes would make a decision that would bring him face to face with his former recruit, under circumstances that would test everything both of them had learned about duty, command, and the true cost of warfare. The intelligence came through at 0347 hours, just as General Hayes was preparing to authorize a dangerous extraction mission for Chen. Intercepted enemy communications revealed that American prisoners of war were being held at a facility less than 2 kilometers from Chen's last known position. The prisoners included Captain James Morrison, a pilot whose fighter had been shot down 3 weeks earlier, and Staff Sergeant Maria Lopez, a medic who had been captured during a rescue operation gone wrong. Hayes stared at the intelligence report, his mind racing through the tactical possibilities. Chen was still alive and fighting, her position known to within a few hundred meters. The prisoners were being held at a facility that would normally require a full company to assault successfully. But Chen's ongoing battle was drawing most of the area's defenses away from the prison compound. "Sir," Major Williams said quietly, "we might never have another opportunity like this. The enemy forces are all focused on Chen's position. The prison facility is probably at minimum security right now." Hayes understood the implication. Chen's desperate fight was creating the perfect diversion for a rescue operation, but it would mean leaving her to face overwhelming odds while they used her battle as cover for another mission. "How long would we need?" Hayes asked. 30 minutes to get a team in position, another 20 to extract the prisoners and get clear. Hayes closed his eyes, feeling the weight of command settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. 50 minutes. Chen would need to survive and continue fighting for 50 minutes against impossible odds, not knowing that her sacrifice was enabling a rescue operation that could save 2 American lives. "Do we have any way to communicate with Chen, to let her know what's happening?" "Negative, sir. Her radio has been silent since the initial attack. We have to assume she can't receive messages." The decision was one of the hardest Hayes had ever made. Send a rescue team to save 2 captured Americans while leaving his best sniper to fight alone, or attempt to extract Chen and lose the opportunity to rescue the prisoners. Both options involved sacrificing some lives to save others, but that, was the brutal arithmetic of warfare that every commander learned to live with. Prep a rescue team, Hayes ordered. Fast insertion, minimal equipment. Get those prisoners out. As the rescue team prepared for their mission, Hayes monitored Chen's situation through intercepted enemy communications and sporadic reports from aerial reconnaissance. She was still fighting, still moving, still eliminating targets with mechanical precision even as her situation became increasingly hopeless. Through her rifle scope, Chen watched enemy vehicles surrounding her position and knew that her time was running out. She had 17 rounds remaining and could count at least 40 enemy soldiers moving to engage her. The mathematics were simple and unforgiving, but Chen's training had prepared her for this moment. She had accepted the probability of death. When she chose to disobey orders and take the long-range shot that started this running battle, now she was focused entirely on making each remaining bullet count, on inflicting maximum damage before her luck finally ran out. She eliminated 3 more targets in quick succession, her shots so precise that each enemy soldier dropped instantly. The remaining forces became more cautious, using cover more effectively, making her job harder. But Chen adapted, using ricochets and indirect fire to reach targets that couldn't be engaged directly. With 12 rounds left, Chen made a tactical decision that would have impressed her instructors at sniper school. Rather than continue defensive shooting, she began advancing toward the enemy positions, using their own confusion and caution against them. Moving between shots, changing positions constantly, she became a mobile threat that the enemy forces couldn't predict or counter effectively. The rescue team, meanwhile, had reached the prison facility and confirmed what the intelligence had suggested. Most of the guards had been pulled away to deal with Chen's attack, leaving only a skeleton crew to watch the American prisoners. What should have been a heavily defended fortress was now vulnerable to a small, well-trained assault team. "Breacher ready," came the whispered radio call from the team leader. "Guards neutralized. We have eyes on the prisoners." Hayes monitored the rescue operation while simultaneously tracking Chen's battle through enemy radio intercepts. She was still fighting, but the report suggested she was wounded and running low on ammunition. Each update made it clear that time was running out. "Prisoners secured," the rescue team reported. "Moving to extraction point now." Hayes felt a moment of relief, followed immediately by renewed concern for Chen. The diversion she had unknowingly provided had worked perfectly, but her own situation was becoming critical. Enemy forces were closing in from all sides, and her ability to continue effective resistance was clearly diminished. Chen, with 8 rounds remaining, had reached the same conclusion. Her left arm was nearly useless from the infected wound. Her vision was blurring from fever and exhaustion, and the enemy had finally begun coordinating their attacks more effectively. She could continue fighting for perhaps another 10 minutes before being overwhelmed. But as she prepared for what she assumed would be her final engagement, Chen heard something that changed everything. The distant sound of helicopters approaching from the direction of friendly lines. American helicopters flying fast and low, heading directly toward her position. Hayes had made another command decision. With the prisoners successfully rescued, he was sending everything available to extract Chen from her hopeless situation. It was risky, expensive, and against standard protocol for rescuing a single soldier. But Hayes refused to abandon the sniper, who had unknowingly enabled the rescue operation. "All aircraft, this is Genesis Actual," Hayes transmitted. "Priority extraction, grid coordinates follow, single friendly, surrounded by hostiles, extreme danger close." The helicopter pilots acknowledged the transmission, but their reports were grim. Heavy ground fire, multiple enemy positions, and a landing zone that was completely compromised. A standard extraction would be impossible under current conditions. "Genesis Actual, this is Falcon 2-1, came the voice of the lead pilot. "LZ is hot. Repeat, LZ is hot. We need that ground fire suppressed before we can attempt pickup." Hayes realized what this meant. Chen would need to continue fighting, not to survive, but to create enough space for the helicopters to land safely. Her final mission had become enabling her own rescue. Chen heard the helicopter transmissions on an emergency frequency and understood immediately what was required. With her remaining ammunition, she needed to eliminate enough enemy positions to create a temporary safe zone for extraction. It was an impossible task under normal circumstances, but Chen had stopped thinking in terms of normal limitations. Moving with the fluid grace that had marked her as exceptional from the beginning, Chen repositioned herself to engage the enemy, forces that posed the greatest threat to the incoming helicopters. Her shooting became a thing of terrible beauty, each shot precisely calculated, each target selected for maximum tactical impact. 5 rounds eliminated a machine gun team that could have devastated the helicopters. 2 more shots took out enemy soldiers with rocket-propelled grenades. Her final round dropped an enemy officer who was coordinating the defensive fire. As her rifle clicked empty, Chen dropped the weapon and drew her sidearm, knowing it would be inadequate for the fight ahead, but determined to continue resistance until the very end. She had become what her training had intended, a soldier who would fight until victory or death with no middle ground acceptable. The helicopters swept in low and fast, their door gunners laying down suppressive fire that kept enemy heads down long enough for the extraction. Chen ran toward the landing zone through a hail of bullets, her wounded arm hanging useless at her side, her vision tunneling from blood loss and exhaustion. She collapsed just as strong hands pulled her into the helicopter, her consciousness fading as the aircraft lifted off and headed toward safety. Her war was over, but the consequences of her actions were just beginning to unfold. As the helicopters returned to base, Hayes prepared to face his most difficult command decision yet. Chen had disobeyed direct orders, engaged in unauthorized combat operations, and compromised her mission by taking an unauthorized shot. By strict military regulations, she deserved court-martial and possible imprisonment. But she had also demonstrated courage, skill, and tactical brilliance that had enabled the rescue of American prisoners and inflicted devastating losses on enemy forces. Her actions, while insubordinate, had achieved results that a full company might not have accomplished under conventional operations. Hayes knew that his next conversation with Chen would determine not only her future, but would also test his own understanding of what it meant to command exceptional soldiers in impossible situations. The recruit who had once hidden her abilities had become a warrior, whose capabilities transcended normal military expectations, and Hayes would need to decide whether such exceptional performance justified exceptional treatment. 3 days after her dramatic extraction, Chen was medically cleared for duty despite the doctor's protests. Her left arm was still in a sling, her face showed the marks of exhaustion and stress, but her eyes held the same steady focus that had first caught Hayes's attention years earlier. She reported to his office at the appointed time, moving with the careful precision of someone who had been through hell and survived. Hayes was waiting for her behind his desk, but something was different about his usual command presence. There was a weight in his posture, a heaviness that suggested the burden of decisions that went beyond normal military protocol. On his desk lay Chen's service file, thick with commendations, kill confirmations, and now a detailed report of her recent unauthorized actions. "Sit down, Sergeant," Hayes said quietly. Chen remained standing. "I prefer to stand for this, sir." Hayes studied her face, seeing traces of the uncertain recruit who had once deliberately missed easy targets, overlaid now with the confidence of someone who had pushed human capability to its absolute limits. The transformation was remarkable and troubling in equal measure. "You disobeyed a direct order," Hayes said without preamble. "You engaged a target against explicit instructions, compromised your position, and initiated a running battle that should have gotten you killed." "Yes, sir." Chen's voice was steady, showing no sign of regret or apology. "You also eliminated 43 enemy personnel, disrupted a major offensive, and unknowingly provided cover for a prisoner rescue operation that saved 2 American lives." Hayes paused. "The question is, which of those facts matters more?" For the first time since entering his office, Chen showed emotion. Not fear of punishment, but confusion about Hayes's approach to what should have been a straightforward disciplinary action. "Sir, I knew the consequences when I made the decision to take that shot. I'm prepared to face whatever charges you deem appropriate." Hayes leaned back in his chair, his gray eyes never leaving Chen's face. "Tell me why you did it. Not the tactical reasons, not the target assessment. Why you chose to disobey an order from a superior officer." Chen was silent for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. When she spoke, Her words carried the weight of hard-earned understanding. Because I realize that my job isn't to follow orders, sir. My job is to win. And sometimes those two things aren't the same. Hayes felt something cold settle in his stomach. It was an answer he had feared but expected. The logical endpoint of creating soldiers with capabilities that transcended normal human limitations. Chen had become so specialized, so focused on results, that she had lost sight of the military's fundamental structure of authority and discipline. That's exactly the wrong answer, Sergeant. Chen's expression didn't change, but Hayes caught a flicker of surprise in her eyes. She had expected punishment for disobedience, not criticism of her reasoning. A soldier who decides when to follow orders and when to ignore them isn't a soldier anymore, Hayes continued. They're a freelancer with access to military weapons, and that makes them dangerous to everyone around them. But sir, the results speak for themselves. 2 American lives saved, major enemy casualties, strategic objectives achieved. Hayes stood up and walked around his desk to face Chen directly. And what happens the next time you decide you know better than your commanding officer? What happens when your independent decision gets friendly forces killed? What happens when every soldier under my command starts making their own tactical decisions based on what they think is best? Chen met his gaze steadily. That won't happen, sir. You're damn right it won't happen, because you're going to understand something that you've apparently forgotten in all your specialized training. Hayes moved closer, his command voice carrying absolute authority. The military doesn't work because every individual soldier is capable of making perfect decisions. It works because soldiers follow orders even when they disagree with them, even when they think they know better, even when they're probably right. For the first time since her extraction, Chen's composure wavered. Hayes could see her struggling with the concept that her exceptional abilities might be less important than her willingness to subordinate them to military discipline. But sir, what about soldiers who have capabilities beyond normal parameters? What about situations where standard protocols don't apply? Hayes had been waiting for this question, and his answer came from years of commanding exceptional individuals who had struggled with similar issues. Then those soldiers need to trust their officers to recognize their abilities and deploy them appropriately. They need to provide input, make recommendations, and express their concerns through proper channels. What they don't do is make unilateral decisions that compromise unit cohesion and command authority. Chen absorbed this, her analytical mind working through the implications. Hayes could see her beginning to understand the broader context of her actions. The way her decision to operate independently had created ripple effects beyond the immediate tactical situation. I never considered the command structure implications, sir. I was focused entirely on target elimination and mission success. That's exactly the problem. You've become so specialized that you've lost sight of the bigger picture. Hayes returned to his desk but remained standing. Now here's what's going to happen. Officially, your actions during this operation will be recorded as exemplary performance under extreme circumstances. You'll receive commendations for your combat effectiveness and tactical innovation. Chen looked confused. Sir, unofficially, you're going to spend the next 6 months in a staff position where you'll learn how command decisions are made, how intelligence is analyzed, and how individual capabilities fit into larger strategic objectives. You're going to understand the military from a perspective beyond your rifle scope. Hayes opened Chen's file and made several notations before continuing. And when that assignment is complete, you're going to report back to me for reassignment to a position where your skills can be utilized properly within the command structure rather than outside it. Chen stood silently, processing this unexpected outcome. She had expected court-martial or commendation, not a combination of both that seemed designed to reshape her understanding of military service. Do you understand what I'm telling you, Sergeant? I think so, sir. You're saying that being an exceptional soldier isn't just about individual performance. It's about being exceptional within the system, not despite it. Hayes smiled for the first time since Chen had entered his office. Exactly. Your abilities are extraordinary, Chen. But abilities without discipline are just another form of chaos. And the military exists to create order from chaos, not add to it. As Chen prepared to leave, Hayes called her attention to one final matter. Sergeant, There's something else you should know. The enemy commander you eliminated was planning to execute the American prisoners the next morning. Your shot didn't just disrupt their offensive, it saved Morrison and Lopez from certain death. Chen stopped at the door, her hand on the handle. Sir? Sometimes disobedience has consequences beyond what we can anticipate. Sometimes it saves lives we don't even know are at risk. But that doesn't make it right, and it doesn't justify making it a habit. After Chen left, Hayes sat alone in his office, contemplating the weight of commanding soldiers whose abilities pushed the boundaries of human performance. He had seen Chen's potential from the first day of basic training, had watched her evolve from a cautious recruit into one of the military's most lethal assets. But only now did he fully understand the responsibility that came with developing such exceptional capabilities. The sniper who had once hidden her talents to avoid standing out had become a weapon of unprecedented precision. But she had also become something more dangerous, a soldier who believed her abilities placed her above the constraints that governed everyone else. Hayes's job now was to ensure that her exceptional skills served the mission rather than replacing it. Outside his window, new recruits were conducting basic training exercises, their young voices carrying on the afternoon air. Among them might be another Chen, another soldier with capabilities that would challenge every assumption about human potential. Hayes made a mental note to watch them more carefully, to remember that creating exceptional soldiers was only half the battle. The harder task was ensuring they remained soldiers first and exceptional second. The war would continue, and soldiers like Chen would be essential to winning it. But victory would come through discipline and order, not individual brilliance, operating outside the chain of command. Hayes had learned that lesson the hard way, and he was determined to ensure that future exceptional soldiers learned it before they had to face the same choice Chen had made in the darkness of enemy territory.